Creativity takes courage. Henri Matisse. Welcome to Deep Dive Creatives, a podcast that explores creativity. I'm David McGinnis. If you appreciate podcasts that celebrate creativity, I would humbly ask you to subscribe or follow this podcast, hit that like button, and leave a comment. That's an encouragement to me and a great way to support creativity. You can watch this podcast on YouTube or listen to it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Meet Joel Nickel.
Creativity is a process that you enter into. It's a process of making things. The biblical Greek word is poiema. It's artwork. It's something that is made.
Joel is a retired Lutheran pastor who spent practically his entire life creating art.
I think I've been an artist all my life. Somebody asked me, how long did it take you to paint this picture? And I said, well, 85 years.
As a young child, Joel was encouraged to pursue his creative endeavors by way of monetary rewards.
I had an aunt who sometimes visited us, and she would pay me 5 cents for something I had drawn or created, and that kind of connected economy together with artwork, and it could be profitable at 5 cents a drawing. I could then buy a whole ice cream cone.
Joel firmly believes he was gifted by God with the talents and with the time to express his creativity.
I love that passage in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, where Paul writes, we are God's work of art, God's poiema. That it's back to the potter and the clay. God forms us as human beings in clay. We're from the earth. We're heirs of Adam, and to earth we will return. But in the meantime, God gives us time to use in creative fashion. Don't waste time. And so I went to art school, along with being ordained as a Lutheran pastor, which took place 60 years ago already. I went to art school in Chicago, the Chicago Academy of Fine Art. And when I landed in Oregon, I went to the Oregon School of Arts and Crafts, which both places accepted me as a part-time student so that I could work and set aside a day and a half to go to art school, because I needed to hone some skills in materials and techniques, and then working at developing your own style. And that for me really happened early on in my Chicago days in 1970. I was interested in forms and their relationship, and then the relationship of color. And so that's kind of at the heart of what I do.
As Joel unpacks his thoughts about creativity and his own creative process, be prepared to be challenged and encouraged to consider that you are a work of art with an amazing ability to be creative. And how we relate to one another might just be the secret to just how creative we can be.
Relationships are very important, relationships between people. Politically, we're having trouble with relationships all across our country. And I'm not sure how that is going to be solved politically, but aesthetically, I want to show that a diversity of forms can coexist in a peaceful kind of arrangement where they interact with each other and intrude as well as share certain levels, planes. The circle, of course, is my favorite form because the circle is a symbol for God without beginning and end. And so little circles happen all over the place because God's poiema, God's work of art, is happening all over the place. And these works of art need to learn how to interact with each other. So, that's kind of a long diatribe on my process of creativity, but you have to hone your skills. I think Robert Rauschenberg said, take something, do something to it, do something else to it. And I would say, well, take something and make something. And oftentimes I would make things because there was a specific need. And my early art was liturgical art for churches, because I served in places that had certain needs that aesthetically, paying attention to the worship spaces in which people dwell is very important. We think of our own homes as places of our dwelling that we want to make sure are comfortable and engaging and a blessing. Someone has criticized my work as being very decorative, which was a put down. But I kind of accept that. If we decorate with intention, it's very important to have something that inspires your sight, that uplifts, lift up your hearts. We say as part of the Christian liturgy, lift up your line of vision, so that if discovery favors the prepared mind, then creativity favors the prepared eye. And that eye needs to look out as well as look in. It's outlook and inlook at the same time, discovering who you are so that what you create is true to your identity as a person, as you are a work of art, making works of art. I started out with acrylic. I really didn't like acrylic because it's plastic. There's something about it that was difficult for me to handle, and I soon discovered gouache, which is opaque watercolor, and you can mix it well. It handles well. It's a flat kind of surface that is very warm, even with cool colors. It's a warm kind of medium. The only problem is that you've got to put it under glass, because if you get water on it, it destroys the painting. I was always interested in forms and shapes. When I went to art school here in Oregon School of Arts and Crafts, I was in their metals department. I was trying to take my ideas about form and do jewelry, pectoral crosses especially, and pendants. And the frustration with working with metal is that the colors are so limited. You can oxidize silver and other colors. You can scratch and do all sorts of things. But I took a workshop with Gene Tudor one summer on enameling at the Grunewald Guild up in Washington. And this transformed my work. That was 25 years ago. Okay. And I've never looked back, because with enameling, you've got the full color spectrum. Enamel is glass. I get it in powdered, finely powdered form that you wet pack onto a surface, a metal surface, which is, I choose copper. I could use pure silver, but why? Because you have to enamel both sides of the piece. Maybe I could just pick up a piece and show. This is a pectoral cross that I just made this last week, and the back side is just a solid color, and it has little silver wires that separate the color. Those are cloisons. It's a French term meaning to separate, to divide. And I find that helps to delineate the form, the forms. And so, in a sense, working with Enamel is an outgrowth of my work with gouache, and before that with acrylics. Creativity is making something. It's a process. It utilizes certain materials, whether you're doing with pigment or wood or metals or fabric or glass or music or you baking a cake. That's creativity, taking material stuff and making something that didn't exist prior to your making. It's the discovery of something that's new, and it's the joy of discovery, really, that I find at the heart of creativity that sort of keeps me going. And even in the process, when you've got work that is in process, that's happening over a period of time, there are discoveries to be made. There are mistakes to be made too, and that's kind of interesting. I think mistakes have a purpose. It's to make a mistake is to be human. And this is World Series time, and I understand that what's coming is to have a machine determine balls and strikes rather than an umpire. And I think that would be a huge mistake because it lets a machine override human decisions, and that is going to be crucial for our society, for our culture. We already have instant replay, so you can check out decisions that are made and then reverse a call. But I think mistakes are really part of the creative process. I mean, I have a box where I keep my mistakes. I don't throw them away. I keep them as reminders. And I've also discovered that when I think something is a mistake, I'll put it aside and come back to it a few days later, and maybe it has possibilities that I didn't see before. And so I think mistakes are part of the creative process, and we should not be put off by the human nature of our own creativity. I've got a little button up there on my board that says, "Never apologize for your art." Yeah. And some of it is good, some of it's mediocre. Even the mediocre paintings have to be painted. Okay, in this process. And you have to deal with your own internal critic, which is pretty intense sometimes. You set out with an idea, or you saw something, and then when you put it down on a piece of canvas or paper, it's not what you imagined. And I do have a little bit of a tremor. I take medicine for it. So that I find that I have to use instruments to help me draw, to get a good circle and a good straight line. My paintings are all free-form paintings, but I'm trying to get a straight line painted. But you have to deal with human imperfections and not be put off by them. So, mistakes, You paint by grace, forgiving your own self. Who knows where all these ideas come from? I mean, I've got a big art library where there are certain artists that I treasure. I mean, this goes back to the 16th century, to the time of the Lutheran Reformation. When there were three primary artists who were really part of that, the beginning of the Renaissance in Germany. Matthias Grunewald painted the Isenheim altarpiece, and the crucifixion and resurrection panel in that altarpiece blew me away. Picasso used the crucifixion in a bunch of his sketchbook pages, pen and ink. I don't think he ever painted a painting based on the Isenheim altarpiece, but those forms found their way into some of his later work. Anyway, so Matthias Grunewald was understanding what Martin Luther was kind of saying, that God reveals himself in suffering. You know, it's not all just glory. It's that God participates with us in our own suffering in Christ. And that was a world-transforming idea. Grunewald was painting the Isenheim altarpiece at the same time Martin Luther was defending his Heidelberg Disputation, which was talking about the theology of the cross, that God is made known in suffering. Well, Albrecht Dürer was the second artist. He was the most famous artist north of Florence in his own time in the 16th century. His father was a goldsmith, and so he learned engraving techniques from his father in his father's workshop. And his engravings, both in metal and wood, are superb. The life of Christ, different sections, and gives us this visual itinerary of the ministry of Jesus, which is really, really very helpful. And of course, Lucas Cranach, he was the town painter in Wittenberg who painted Luther's portraits, and he was an entrepreneur extraordinaire, real estate and publishing, printing. He printed Luther's first Bible that translated into German, and of course included some of his etchings in the Bible, so that the first Lutheran Bible was an illustrated Bible. And I point out that there is also an iconoclastic streak in Lutheranism that doesn't trust images. But Cranach convinced Luther that, yeah, you know, if you can picture God, picture Christ in your heart, why not picture him with your eyes? Well, those three artists in the 16th century have been an inspiration for me. And then a 50-year period also in Germany from 1910 to 1965, 55 years, these artists were called German Expressionists. And they too, I don't think intentionally, but it just happened that they were painting the theology of the cross. Emil Nolde, he toured, he went to New Guinea. Now this is 1910, 1911, and came back with all sorts of sketches of people of different races and ages, and his idea of the church, the early church, was of all these different races together in a community, bringing the separated together. The problem was he didn't paint the master race that Adolf Hitler wanted. Hitler was a classicist. He wanted this big, strong, forceful figures, you know, the ideal male and female images. Well, the German Expressionists didn't paint that way. You know, you had Max Beckmann, who had to flee Germany, came to the United States and settled in St. Louis. His painting, the deposition, taking the body of Christ down off the cross, is really a strong influence to me when doing pectoral crosses. And then Otto Dix. Otto Dix was an artist who, as a young man, fought in the trenches of World War I. And he was so turned off by what he had discovered, he kept sketchbooks of trench warfare, that he came out of that and adopted a style that he called the new objectivity, which was to show human beings in all of their weaknesses and joys and folly sometimes. Otto Dix was conscripted. He was in his 50s, 55, 56 years old, conscripted in the last 4 months of World War II. He fought in both wars. He had moved to Switzerland, but Germans could extract their citizens from Switzerland, and he was forced into battle, was captured, was in a prisoner of war camp, and decorated their chapel. And he painted a self-portrait of himself behind barbed wire that I think is a Christ head. Powerful, powerful stuff. Because of this, he and a bunch of other German Expressionists were condemned by Hitler. Hitler called them degenerate artists. And Hitler mounted a special exhibit of degenerate art, 1937, in Munich. And the point was to poke fun at these artists. They were weird. They were painting people that were lunatics, and this is certainly not the master race. And for the very reason that Hitler oppressed these artists, we should investigate and honor their work. These artists were interested in truth, not only beauty. The beauty is kind of secondary. It's the crucifixion is God's foolishness is wiser than human foolishness, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength, and God's ugliness is more sublime than human beauty. And those artists understood that. David Hockney wrote a book on how artists in the Renaissance used optical devices to render such fine paintings, the fabric work that's in the foreground as well as the background being just right on, something you can't just do by eyeballing alone. He was talking about the discovery of the camera, the single point perspective that was a Renaissance discovery. We think of perspective as, telephone lines going down to a certain point, or railroad tracks, or a road, or somebody's fence. And the point is that infinity is beyond our grasp, beyond our sight. We'll never get there. And so Hockney was talking about establishing the reverse perspective of bringing the background into the foreground. And he does that with collage, with photographs. Interesting work. So that too has inspired me, because faith really is a journey to a reverse perspective, of seeing the presence of God in imperfection, in suffering, human beings struggling with mistakes that might turn out to be just the creative impulse that they need. When I'm down in the studio, always leave something here on my jeweler's bench or my drawing table that's unfinished to come back to, as a spur to move me on. But yes, you do run into these levels. In the past, people called this melancholy. People kind of put down melancholy as being slothful and, just laziness. But this is Albrecht Dürer. I had to deal with this. He said melancholy really comes from overwork. Okay? When you're working too hard, you're putting too much time into this focus, and you forget about other things, about living in community with other people, and eating right and sleeping right, and getting exercise. I mean, I can sit here in my studio all day and I don't walk very far, and so these dry spells, they come because of physical tightness, exhaustion. And so Albrecht Dürer is saying, his advice to young artists when they meet a time of melancholy is play some songs on the lute. and so that music is something that pulls you out of this into a sphere that is, as a visual artist, I'm not creating music, but you know, I listen to jazz and classical music usually every day when I'm down working in the studio. And I find that music pulls me out of the dry spell and prompts me to go for a walk or go call a friend or write a letter to somebody and do something that's kind of different for a time being, that puts me into a broader community of association. I had a canvas that I had completely covered with paint, with acrylic paint, and it was not working. And so I got the sander out and sanded down to make it smooth, and I re-gessoed the area and then repainted it. Sometimes I'll get a piece of enamel work out of the kiln and things are not right. And the question is, how do you fix it? You know, sometimes it has to just go in the mistake box. Other times, you know, I have a whole set of diamond drills and diamond files that cut through glass. And so I can repurpose, sometimes overlay with another color, sometimes drill a hole right through something and recolor it. You know, the enamel pieces, they get fired 6 or 7 times a piece anyway. You know, 3 minutes at 1500 degrees usually. And, you know, so it's possible to redo or correct what you see as mistakes. And so never throw away a piece. You know, it might hold a new direction to go that you didn't even see before. And that's happened many times to me. I'm above ground. Okay, I wake up every morning and I'm above ground. And my daughter, who's a first grade teacher, she was teaching her children to be part of the parent-teacher conference, and that the children would tell their parents what they were doing in class, and also have a prayer with their parents, which was kind of a challenge. And of course, she trained them on how to do this and different things, a way to approach this. And sure enough, the next day, with this little boy with his parents came in, and it came time for the prayer, and he got a little bit flustered, and he just said simply, "Dear God, I like this day. Amen." You know, I told my daughter Joy, I want to put that on the ceiling of my bedroom so that when I wake up in the morning, that's the first thing I see. What motivates me to get up and get going? Dear God, I like this day. And there's some power in that. You know, again, there are economic struggles that artists face, you know. I don't get wealthy doing the artwork that I make, but I find that what really motivates me is sharing what I do with the community. If I can help people have a new vision, a lighter vision, a vision of hope and possibility, you know, that's really means a lot to me. Many years ago, I had one of these dreams. It was almost on biblical proportions, where the Lord was getting my attention. I was too ego involved in what I was making. And I had made a pectoral cross using copper, brass, and silver that was primo in my view. And in this dream, the Lord said, I want you to give this cross to my good friend, Don Marxhausen. And I said, Lord, do you know how valuable this piece is? You want me to give it away? And this went on for some time, you know. And finally, this voice said to me, well, you're giving the cross to me. You're just sending it to Marxhausen. So the import of that dream, it was it was so important. I wrote it down verbatim almost as I woke up in the morning. I had to do that. But the import was I have to tithe the crosses I make. Because as the Lord told me, I don't own the copyright on a cross. He does. And so every 10th cross I make, I give away to somebody engaged in ministry. In fact, it's more than just a tithe, actually. And I found that in the art exhibits that I've had at the Kaiser Community Center, I'm working on my 9th consecutive yearly show, one-man show there. I also have a artist reception at which I raffle off priceless nickel art. It's a giveaway. Everybody has a number, and if your number is called, you get to select from maybe 15 pieces of art that I'm giving away. And not only does that give people incentive to come to my show, but it also puts art in their homes, which maybe they can't afford or wouldn't do or have otherwise. So again, this is sharing. What keeps me going? It's sharing with the community. Pablo Picasso said that good artists copy, great artists steal. Yeah, and what Picasso meant was that you study the work of artists that maybe 100 years ago or so, and then you do your own adaptation of what they saw in your own style. And that continues the process of what those artists saw, what you are now seeing, and hopefully somebody will steal from you. It's a process of carrying on the development of visual arts, and what hampers that? Well, censorship often does. Okay. Now there are certain age-appropriate things that we've got to be careful with. Okay, especially with electronic media. But censorship. I had a distant aunt who was a librarian in California in the 1930s when the growers refused to let her have John Steinbeck's book, The Grapes of Wrath, in her library. And it was a big political brouhaha, and they passed a law saying they got to take these books out. Well, she took all 15 copies and sent them to all the libraries in California, and that later on, when the law was changed, they all sent The Grapes of Wrath back to her library. So censorship, it's really a mistake. I view life a certain paradox. I mean, these, two extremes. I mean, you've got the sacred and the secular. You've got heaven and earth. You have joy and sorrow. You have blessing and cursing. This is part of human experience. And art is involved in all of this, hopefully in truth-telling ways. And so you don't turn away from the difficulties of life. I'm trying to think of the artist's name. He was part of the Catholic worker movement in the Depression and in right around World War II. Who pictured Jesus standing in the bread line with other people waiting for their food handout. In our country today, we are the richest country in the world. There should not be poverty. I remember, this was back in the 70s when I was pastor of a Lutheran church on the south side of Chicago, in a cavernous neo-Gothic church that would seat 1,700 people. One of the times when it got filled, Jesse Jackson came to speak. And his Operation Push had across the church balcony a great big banner that said, "Declare hunger illegal." Yeah, that of course that was an image that obviously has stuck with me for a long time. So dealing with the paradoxes of life, that should find a way into an artist's work. It finds its way into the work of musicians, composers, authors, and that needs to be investigated, treasured, and make of it what you can. The goal is to be true to my identity. Okay, and I have to accept that. I'm left-handed. The Latin word for left is sinistra, sinister. Lefties are sinister, even though we're one step closer to first base than the right-handed batters. And so this sinister person became a pastor. Well, depending on who you talk to, the evaluations might go one way or the other, but that's kind of my identity, to be in my right mind, the two hemispheres of the brain, and that I discovered that I was not just a word merchant, but that I was always also seeing images. And so it was putting the logical and the intuitive together. Sometimes they crossed over, sometimes they were separate. But so I had to discover that I was also an artist, along with being a clergyman. And, way back when I was first in the ministry, there were clergy discounts. You could golf on Mondays with a clergy discount, Those benefits are no longer there because clergy are looked upon, we're maybe just a tad above used car salesman at this point, But again, integrity, being true to your identity, I don't abandon what I am or what I have been given. Life is a gift, and so gratitude is really part of what I feel at this stage in life especially. I give thanks for the people that I've met, that I know, the people that maybe didn't like my art. There been a few, and they were friends, I think only once did someone that I knew walk out on one of my sermons, But I because of my Chicago experience, I had a social conscience always, and to see the ministry of Jesus in that light of visiting the poor, providing food for the hungry. Jesus was a self-giving person. And that's part of my identity as well. It comes to me as a gift, but there were people like my parents and others who helped me realize who I was, But at this stage in life, I'm grateful for what has been given to me and hope I can pass along some joy to other people. Obviously, idolatry is a threat. Art can be used to promote the powerful. And as someone who has a social conscience, I'm very aware of how art has been used to promote dictators. Adolf Hitler he had a sense of art, but it was always the strong and the perfect ideal of the Nordic race. That's not the only problem, though. Iconoclasm is also a problem. And that word iconoclast means to break an image. Okay? And so in the history of the Christian church, there have been periods of iconoclasm where images were suspect, and so all the images were thrown out of the church. And iconoclasm comes, in waves sometimes. Historically, it's low, and then it comes to the fore again, and it drops off. What I find sometimes in the Protestant church, even of the Lutheran denomination, is that the visual arts are looked upon as a matter of indifference. Something that's okay if you want to have it. It's maybe a little bit expensive, but we can do without it. And my counter, well, why don't we take this money and give it to the poor? Of course, I've learned that people who are of a generous spirit give to the poor as well as appreciate and fund beauty. Okay, and so it's that's the challenge. Iconoclasm in the churches, idolatry, maybe in the political systems, and the difference between those two extremes, iconoclasm and idolatry, is the incarnation. God joining the human race in the birth of Christ. There are really two words. One is I've inherited from my father, who, when I went away to college, he said, "Finish in a blaze of glory," which he meant don't slough off, pay attention, get your work done on time, I'm helping you to pay your tuition, so don't waste it, okay? Finish in a blaze of glory. Well, of course, that's what I told my children when I drove them to school and dropped them off every morning, finish in a blaze of glory. And now they're telling their children the same thing, so that my grandchildren, they laugh whenever they hear that phrase, finish in a blaze of glory. But, that phrase, we put it on my father's tombstone. Okay, and that's really where it is now complete. That's the glory that we finish in. And so how do we manage the day-to-day? Well, 3 letters, PMA, positive mental attitude. And that's kind of critical for a person like myself, who is also self-critical and analytical, and a positive mental attitude. I don't always achieve that, and so my children, all 3 of them, played tennis very well when they were in school, high school. And when they would get down on themselves in a tennis match, I just shout PMA, and that would pick them up and get them focused again. And so even those 3 letters, they still exist in our family. Positive mental attitude. And you achieve that simply by living by grace and the love of God. And, thank dear God, I love this day.